The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Now, you may have known this. You may be a much bigger hockey fan than I am. But if you would have said to me yesterday, true or false, has Alex Ovechkin ever scored a playoff overtime goal? I would have said, of course. He's the all-time leading goal scorer. They've been in the playoffs just about every year that he's played. This is his 20th year, 16th time in the playoffs. Of course he scored an overtime goal. Not till last night. Last night he scored the overtime goal. Capitals beat the Canadiens in the first game. Ovechkin, who's supposed to be coming to the end, doesn't look like it. Scored the first goal, assisted on the second, and then delivered the overtime game winner, and the Capitals can go after blowing a 2-goal lead in the third period. So they move on to game 2 tomorrow night. It's every other night, so they play tomorrow night at home, and then they'll play Friday night in Montreal. And at least you don't have to worry about a sweep, because in hockey, it's so random. Yeah, they're the number one seed in the East, but how many times have we seen it over the years that they go in as the top dog and they underperform? And Barry Zerluga's got a really good column about this today, about what the past has brought to this team, and talked about what happened in 2010 when they won their first President's Trophy for finishing with the best record. He said they were an offensive juggernaut, averaging just under 4 goals a game. They beat the Canadiens in games 3 and 4, 5-1 and 6-3 to take a 3-1 lead in the series. Well, we saw a lot of that in the 90s, even in the 80s with the Pittsburgh Penguins. It would happen year after year after year. 3-1 lead, they would blow it, and Tony Kornheiser would write his annual Choking Dogs column. And it happened again in 2010, as Barry writes here. Do you remember this? When the Caps flew home from Montreal after Game 4, they ran into a fog at Dulles and were eventually diverted to BWI. Problem is, it was after 1 a.m. and there were no customs officials on hand, so they waited on the tarmac, in their seats, on the plane, until almost 4 a.m. when the last player was processed and permitted back in the United States. And maybe that's when the series turned. And remember the name Yaroslav Halak? Yep, the lock by Halak. He saved 37 of 38 shots to force Game 6, saved an astonishing 53 of 54 to force Game 7, and then stole the series from the Capitals by saving 41 of 42 in the 7th and deciding game back in the district. It's way too early to get ahead of ourselves and go, oh, God, 2010 is coming again, but that's what winning Game 1 means. And also Barry points out that, maybe because they won the Cup in 2018, that some of that choking dog pressure has been released from them. He writes that since they broke through and won the Cup, they have not won a playoff series, not in 2019 when they blew a 2-0 lead to Carolina, lost a gut punch of a Game 7 in double overtime, not in 2020 when their time in the coronavirus bubble ended in a 5 decisive game series against the New York Islanders, not in 2021 when Boston needed only 5 games to dust them, not in 2022 when it was Florida in 6, and not last year against the top-seeded New York Rangers who swept them into the summer. So there's not going to be a sweep this year like last year, but even though that pressure has been released from them by winning the Cup, and I think that, as you look at the career of Alex Ovechkin, just think if they had not won in 2018 and what this season might mean as them being the top seed in the East and Ovechkin setting the goal-scoring record. Is it finally going to happen? Is it finally going to happen for him? And they're sort of playing with house money, though a second one would be nice. John Walton, phenomenal job on radio last night. This is why it's so great to have local people doing it. I watched Joe B. and Locker on Monumental last night. They were spectacular, as always. They know the team, and this is knowing the team, knowing the player. John Walton calling the overtime goal for Ovechkin last night with the proper setup from someone who's done his homework.
Should be repeated because it's crazy that it has happened for being the NHL's all-time goal leader and all-time Caps leader in playoffs. Alexander Ovechkin has never scored a playoff OT goal. Be a good time for it.
Really good time.
Back near side for Laine. Puck iced by Montreal. A breakout that fails out of their zone, and every time you get an offensive zone draw in sudden death overtime, heart rate gets up a little bit. Maybe you can find somebody a loose puck here, and Alex Ovechkin will come on for this.
Oh, they'll try. Ovechkin will line up behind Dylan Strome, looking for that quick snapshot. He's done so many times over the years. Dylan can win this cleanly right back to Ovechkin.
Chychrun is there too. As the puck comes toward Beauvillier, Ovechkin was in the vicinity, and a shot here from Beauvillier. It's hit, they score, and Ovechkin got it! His first overtime game winner! Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Montreal! Alex Ovechkin, the overtime game-winning goal! Caps lead the series 1-0.
With a signature John Walton call, Capitals take the 1-0 lead. Sean McDonough doing the game on ESPN. Excellent hockey announcer. Grew up in Boston. Had the rhyming game-winning goal.
Ovechkin scores! Now he has that playoff overtime goal. What else can he do? Washington wins 3-2.
Yeah, what else can he do? Washington wins 3-2. That might not be a bad headline, though the headline in the Post today is overtime is overtime. That's not bad as well. Ovechkin, having been the subject of all this praise over the last month or so as he was chasing the Wayne Gretzky record, was, kind of eager to deflect on this.
Should be repeated because it's crazy that it has happened for being together.
That's not it. This is it.
Goal, it's a goal. It doesn't matter in the playoffs, and especially in OT, it doesn't matter who scored. I think it gives you confidence, and
Yeah, a goal is a goal. Teammate Tom Wilson.
Yeah, he's a beast. He's a machine. And he's out there creating energy for our team, scoring. He does it all. He does everything for us. That's what a leader does. It's one thing to be good all season long, but the guys that show up and hit and block shots and, lead the team, that's why he's a legend.
Yeah, and to do this, to kind of clamp down on the Spielkas that's starting to creep in once you get to overtime. Capitals, especially when they played back in the Capitol Center, they were famous for this. They had these extended playoff games, which is really what I feared when this game went to overtime last night. You got to hang till the end, right? And they had a 4 overtime game. Not sure about a 5. The most famous would have been on Easter Sunday in 1987 when they went to the limit with the New York Islanders. Ron Weber famously didn't go to the bathroom the whole time. I mean, it was just insane. And they finally gave up the game-winning goals like 2 or 3 in the morning. And they had a bunch of those. But last night they get it done in the first 3 minutes of overtime. Spencer Carberry knows he's got a team with, kind of a delicate balance here. We went through their recent playoff history after the Stanley Cup, the sweep last year against the Islanders. And, now he's staring down the barrel of Choke City after they take a 2-0 lead in the third period and allow Montreal to tie the game, only to finally pull it out in OT.
It's so hard this time of year. You just got to be consistent with it. You got to do it shift after shift after shift after shift. And I thought we got away from that in the third period. Credit to our guys for resetting in the intermission and refocusing. And because I felt like even after they tied it up, I was trying to drum up some energy on our bench because there was a lot of poor me. And now all of a sudden we've blown a 2-goal lead. And so we needed to regroup there and find ourselves again and get ready to, okay, whatever's happened doesn't matter. That's playoff hockey. You're going to be in some situations that are difficult. You're going to face adversity, and you've got to find a way out of that. You've got to find a way to win your next shift. And I thought our guys did a real good job of that in overtime.
So now we move to game 2. Carberry understands these Canadians are going to be ready for that.
Well, anytime you win a game, game 1 is a big game, and to win in overtime because them coming back. One thing I've learned about their coach, their team, this team will not go quietly into the night, and they've shown that over the last 2 months of the way that they've played. So if we think for a second, yeah, you've chipped away, you've laid a foundation, you've won one game, but I have no doubt that they probably walk out and they probably have a team meeting tomorrow and they probably have confidence coming out of game one in our building. We had them right there. We played one period out of 3, those types of things. So if we know we have our hands full, and we're going to see a better first period from them in game 2. I guarantee it. And that's on us to counter that and know that that's coming and not drop our guard.
It's 7 o'clock on tomorrow night, and then they move to Montreal for game 3 on Wednesday. The surprise last night, I don't think it was a shocker, but we didn't know about the status of Logan Thompson, who'd been out since early April with a upper body injury. They never reveal exactly what it is in hockey, but without an upper body injury, and played very well last night. And we all know, we've seen this over the years in hockey. It's the goalie that stands on his head, eh? And if they can get a kind of a playoff run that they might be able to get from Logan Thompson. Remember, Braden Holtby did not start in the playoffs when they won the Cup in 2018. He came along the way and then was really a huge difference maker for them. And the save that he had against Pittsburgh is legendary in Caps history. And if in fact Logan Thompson, who they picked up last year, remember he was with he's already won a cup. He won a cup with Vegas, and has that kind of experience. And that could be a huge difference as we move on. That's pretty much the extent of my hockey knowledge. I do watch the playoffs. I watch it when the Caps are in. There is no better atmosphere. It's just absolutely tremendous. Every single trip up and down the ice, you get in a close game like this, and even taking a 2-0 lead into the third period, you never relax on that. You never do, and it's exhausting. It's exhilarating. It's really incredible, even for somebody like me, who I consider myself to be a casual hockey fan. The interesting news yesterday from Masson, and this is something maybe to keep an eye on for it being a game changer, not just for the way we watch baseball, but the way we consume television. And forever, a lot of reason that people kept cable was because Masson didn't stream games. Well, this is coming, and this could be related to why Ted Leonsis said that he wasn't going to televise Nats and or Orioles games unless he bought the Nationals. So maybe this is going to be the way things go in future years, that we won't have cable. And when you think about cable, you think about the trucks always coming out to the house and things seeing work, and you don't have that with streaming. So I would think that we're moving in the direction. I'm no cable TV or TV expert. We're moving in the direction of that. And yesterday, Masson announced that you can stream Orioles or Nationals games for $90 a year. The current plan is available for $20 a month, so you get a little bit of a discount if you pick it up now. And it will exempt them from blackouts and things like MLB TV and Apple TV and all that stuff. You'll be able to stream all the games. So we are going to the a la carte option here. It's pretty clear that you will be able to pick and choose what channels you watch. There's just too damn much to watch now. It really is. Now, you keep cable if you still like local news, like I do. I watch a lot of Channel 4 news, so I get that. There are certain things that are cable only, but most of these high premium channels like Showtime and HBO, they're all being streamed also. ESPN is going in that direction. So that's where we're headed with this. You will have a number of channels that you watch, and I wonder about some of these, auxiliary channels, if you want to call them that. Like, I like to watch the Food Network from time to time. Am I going to pay $30 a month to watch the Food Network? Hell no. So I don't know. I don't know enough about how this works, but it would seem to me that I would pick up a subscription to watch the Nats. Now, my wife grew up in Baltimore. She's an Orioles fan, so I guess we would have to get that too. Do we pay $180 for the baseball season to get both teams? I guess we do. And I don't know. I don't really think it's going to cut my bill necessarily. It's just that the availability is going to be greater with the streaming, and you're not going to be subject to the Apple TV blackouts and things like that. That's probably the way it's going to go. So we'll see Masson. Now, maybe Masson is able to control this in a way that it's profitable for them. Maybe that's the way it's going to make sense for them, because the way things look right now, the Nationals are under a one-year deal with Masson. They're out at the end of the year. The Orioles own Masson. Are they going to survive with just the Orioles? I don't think so. So this is probably going to lead to the toppling of Masson. You've also heard that Major League Baseball is going to bundle up a bunch of teams, and they like to have the market of D.C. and Baltimore because combined it's number 4 in the country. So in the way that the NFL games are on CBS or Fox, and, they're all to a regional, national audience, all that stuff, that's probably the way it's going to work in baseball. And the only big regional cables that will survive will be the ones owned by the big money teams like the Yankees and the Dodgers and the Red Sox and so forth. So that was an interesting development yesterday. NFL draft coming up on Thursday night. Mel Kiper was on with Dan Patrick yesterday. We'll play some of what he said. And John Beck, who was a ridiculously bad quarterback for Washington for a year. Remember 2011, how awful he was? Well, he's not now a quarterback guru. It's the old thing: if you can't do, teach. And apparently he's really tuned into the quarterback market. He was on with Rich Eisen yesterday and had some interesting things to say about this draft class, especially versus last year's. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Coming up at 10, Coming up at 10, we'll talk to Dennis Scott, former NBA player, played locally, was in the Capital Classic in 1987, and now is the CEO of the Capital Classic, which is taking place at Care First Arena in Southeast this weekend. We'll get to his thoughts on that and his career and multitasking that he did in broadcasting last weekend was absolutely terrific under fire. And we'll play some of what he said and get his reaction to that coming up at 10 o'clock. We'll get to some draft stuff here in a minute. But finally, there seems to be an effort to get some control in what is absolute chaos, especially in college football. If you're not keeping up with this, the NCAA has approved rules for direct athlete payments. This is nothing, earth-shattering news. We've been talking about this for a while, that there's going to be something of a salary cap. They're talking like $21 million per school, and you decide how to divvy that up among college football, college basketball, and the other non-revenue sports. And this is also tied somewhat to a settlement of a lawsuit, which is going to have the NCAA pay out close to $3 billion to athletes who should have gotten money but would have been screwed. And what this does is it finally gets some control of a lawless situation here. Now, they have not gone as far as I know, but it's got to be coming, where they will have contracts. You got to have that. You have 2-year contracts for the players. If they're good enough and they want to stay, you give them a new 2-year deal. If they want to leave after 1 year, there's a buyout. And there also, I guess, would be a buyout both ways, that if the guy doesn't live up to expectations, or a woman, if it's a basketball player, you simply release that player and you pay off what the buyout is. It's the same as it would work for coaches. So that's what's coming. But here's how nuts things are. You probably have been following Nico Iamaleava. This was the quarterback at Tennessee who had a holdout and is due to make like $2.4 million, wanted $4 million, stayed out of the Friday practice, didn't participate in the spring game. And the school got fed up and said, good, we're done with you. Go away. And he's landed at UCLA. And reports are he's not even getting the $2.4 million that he was getting at Tennessee. But, the way things work now, you can leave when you want to leave. Now, once there's a salary cap in place next year, who knows what happens when he wants to leave the year after that. But here's maybe some of the reason that he is going to UCLA, because his younger brother, whose first name is Madden. I don't know whether the parents named him for well, at that point, the video game or the fact he was an announcer. But, there's a younger brother named Madden Iamaleava, and he is now transferring from Arkansas to go to UCLA. So you're going to have the brothers as quarterbacks here. Now, Nico's already used a year of eligibility. I guess Madden would have been a red shirt, so he's got 4 years left. I don't know how this is all going to sort out, but I guess the goal is that the older brother is the starter and the younger brother is the backup, and eventually the younger brother takes over. Who knows? Or maybe he goes to another school. But Madden Iamaleava, he's big. He's 6'3". He was a top recruit, and he had originally committed to UCLA a year ago. Then he decided to hop over to Arkansas with his Long Beach Poly teammate, J.C. Brown. He did not play his senior year of high school after he was declared ineligible following his transfer from Warren High School to Long Beach Poly. Led Warren to an 11-3 record. That was his only season as a high school starting quarterback. This guy, he's on his second college, and he hasn't played since his junior year of high school, which is his only year as a starter. Who knows how he's going to be? But here's the upshot, too, of Nico Iamaleava leaving Tennessee to go to UCLA. Oh, yeah, UCLA quarterback Joey Aguilar is transferring. Where's he going? Tennessee, of course, which is going to lead to speculation that we're not that far away from having trades in college. I think that's totally in play. Why not? Nobody's talking about academic progress rate or any of that nonsense. And there's more, like the Ginsu knife, there's more on Joey Aguilar, who is technically a UCLA quarterback, but he's only been there a few months because he had transferred from Appalachian State, where he had played for 2 years. So the game of musical chairs is absolutely nuts. Meantime, we have word from Adam Schefter that Cam Ward, who is on most boards the number one quarterback coming out of Miami, has had a long and winding road to the NFL draft as he started at Incarnate Word, which is a small school in San Antonio, which 40 years ago when I was there was an all-girls school, but made his way to Miami, had a good enough year last year that he's going to be the number one pick and that Tennessee has already let teams know that they're going to take him. I don't know why you would want that out right now unless you're really trying to draw people in to see if they can give you big money offers, like you're trying to increase the leverage a little bit. But not that many years ago, I'd say maybe 20 years ago, maybe as much as 25, but until they had the rookie salary cap and you didn't have, situations where a bust quarterback wouldn't ruin your franchise, like Jamarcus Russell, who got like $50 million from the Raiders and was a complete bust. You'd see teams that would decide who they were going to take, especially at the quarterback position, when there were a bunch of them, kind of at the same level. Like last year, you'd sign them based on signability, or you draft them. If you had the number one pick, for example, like Cleveland did when they came in the league in 1999, and they wound up, with a quarterback that they felt they could sign. And that's the way it used to work. But now with the rookie salary cap, that takes care of everything. You don't have holdouts like we did with Heath Schuler here, who was also a bust. Those things don't happen anymore. So I don't really know the purpose of letting that out. John Beck, speaking of busts, this is the guy, remember, before they got RG3 in 2012. And they had the Donovan McNabb disaster in 2010. I didn't think he was that bad, but the Shanahans didn't like him. So they go into 2011, and they got Rex Grossman and John Beck. John Beck had been originally drafted by the Houston Texans when Kyle Shanahan was there as an assistant and had said, I stood on the table for him. And he was in Houston for a little while. He was in Miami for a little while. He was in Baltimore for a little while. Never got traction. BYU quarterback, so he was older. He was like, 24, 25 when he got drafted. Finally, he winds up here in 2011, and they're going to battle it out. It's kind of Drek versus Drek. It's Rex versus Beck. And finally, Rex wins the job. And Beck gets to play when Rex just throws interception after interception. And Beck is so bad. They play a game against the Buffalo Bills where they get shut out. He was sacked 10 times Finally, a week later against the 49ers, he completed a whole bunch of passes, but all of them were like 2-yard dump-offs. I mean, this guy was horrific as a quarterback. But now he's become a trusted quarterback guru. He trains top quarterbacks. And he was on with Rich Eisen yesterday looking at this quarterback draft class versus the terrific one that we had last year.
I know what last year's draft class was like.
Yes.
You have all those quarterbacks where it was guaranteed, if this guy doesn't go 5, this guy's going 7, and this guy's going 8. And it was like this huge thing where there are these chunk of teams at the top that are going to be taking quarterbacks. And that's not the feeling this year. That's not what I hear. I think most people assume and believe Cam's going to be the first guy off the board. But then once he goes off the board, everybody's saying, what now? What next? Does anybody really know what's going to happen? And I heard you talking before I came in about these possible trades back up into the first round.
Yes.
I think as you hit the teens, the latter end of the teens, and you start sitting at that pick right before Pittsburgh, like you said, what can start happening with trades back up? Because you got to think if somebody's sitting there, whether it's Jackson Dart, Shadur Sanders, if somebody's sitting at 21 and Pittsburgh has a pick, you think they're going to take him. So that means if somebody's got to trade up, you either got to jump Pittsburgh or take a chance that Pittsburgh doesn't want the guy you want.
Unless you think the player's not worth it. You know what I mean? And that's the whole thing, is the evaluation right now is I'd rather take someone else and roll the dice on later in the draft or next year.
Yeah.
And how can that's what I'm wondering, like, can you walk me through the mind of an evaluator to conclude such a thing right before a draft?
Well, the tough part is about evaluating quarterbacks is everybody puts in so much time and effort and does their homework, but is it an exact science? Like, how many quarterbacks get taken high and it doesn't work out? And then there's why did it not work out? Was it the team? Was it the situation? Was it the offense? There's all these things. And then you look at guys that get picked later on in the draft and they go to spots and it works out for them. And someone says, oh, well, if we were to redraft, we would now draft that guy in the first round instead of the fourth round. Well, if there was really a science about it and the guys knew exactly what they were doing, there wouldn't be that many of those situations. And so I think as they go into this, teams are going to say, like, we want first round pick. We want to feel really good. And I don't want to say safe, but like, we want to believe that there's a great chance this guy's going to work out. And this just popped in my head, but I was talking with the GM a while back and they said, look, if you know you got to take a first round quarterback because that's what your team needs, you don't worry about the slot. You don't worry if it's pick 12, pick 18, pick 24. If you got to take a first round quarterback, you take a first round quarterback. And so, that's where like then trading back up. I think some teams say, okay, maybe to get our guy, we have to trade back up, but is it worth it to us? Do we think that they can be that player that we want to have for 5 years? Because you don't want to take a first-round quarterback and not want to pick up that fifth-year option when you take him. Like, nobody's doing that. They're saying, let's take a chance, pick a guy that hopefully we can get for 5 years under that contract. Because in today's world, the best contract you can get is a rookie contract. Because if they succeed, man, it skyrockets.
And that's what makes things so interesting here. Unless you get a guy and, you hope that Jaden Daniels continues to perform at the level he did last year. Unless you land one of those gems, one of those guys, a Patrick Mahomes, let's say, even a Brock Purdy, who the jury is still somewhat out on, but has shown enough. Unless you get one of those guys, you're always looking for the next guy, because the difference between playing under a rookie contract and a second contract for a quarterback, insane. Is Dak Prescott worth $60 million a year? I don't think so. But the Cowboys don't have another answer, because if they did, they would have moved on from Dak. And that's the economics of the game. I think that's also why you're seeing the running back position become a little bit more elevated, because the cost of running backs are relatively cheap now compared to the way they used to be. And it's all about managing the salary cap. And unless you have, a Josh Allen, somebody at that level, then move on to the next guy. Find out if the next guy is going to be that. And even if he's not, even if he's pretty good, what you don't want is a pretty good under a second contract. You want a pretty good under a rookie contract, because that makes an enormous amount of difference in what you can do with the cap. And you go back to Russell Wilson, who was not only under a rookie deal, he was under a third-round rookie deal. So it was relative pennies. And that helped Seattle certainly to go to back-to-back Super Bowls, winning the first. And if they would have handed off to Marshawn Lynch, they would have probably won back-to-back. But that's a story for another day. All right, to Mel Kiper, who was on yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show, and I was very happy to hear Dan say that he is writing a letter to the Hall of Fame, as he did with Brent Musburger, to get Mel the Pete Rozelle Radio Television Award, which he should get. There have been a few other people that have gotten it at ESPN, Tom Jackson, Andrea Kramer, and Chris Berman, who was the first of the ESPN people to get it. Mel is certainly in that league and should get it. Mel deflected, as he did with me. We're going to play that tomorrow as we head towards the draft. But I'm really happy to hear that Dan is taking up his case. In the meantime, Mel answering a question which gets asked a lot at this time of year is the way things just, kind of move all over the place after the season ends. Remember, we're in late April now. Last time these guys were on the field was 3 months ago or more, like 3.5 months ago. Here's Mel on that.
Why do so many opinions seem to shift based on stuff that's not from actual games that these players play?
It's college to pro, Dan. That's what makes it so difficult. You're seeing guys play in college against players who will not be in the National Football League. So you're not getting apples to apples. And some games you want to watch an offensive tackle, but the defensive end's going on the right side or left side, opposite where the player you want the one-on-one to be. So you get little snippets, snapshots here and there of a player against another great player. That's why Senior Bowl practices are so important, because you're getting good on good. You don't get that in college on a regular basis. So a lot of times the stats can be skewed one way. He can have great numbers against, I call them AOGs, Dan, another occupation guys. That's what they are. They're AOGs. That's what you go up against in college. I coined that phrase years ago. That's what it is, because that's college football. That's the same thing when you talk about high school. It's tough to go from one level to the next and be accurate with your evaluation. So when you end the day, it's over evaluation too, because you're talking about so much time between the end of the season until late April that you do kind of overthink it. And you do factor in things that maybe shouldn't be as heavily weighed because it's so much time. And it is level to a different level. And you have to look at everything possible to try to make a good evaluation. And certainly, Dan, a lot of scouts believe, and general managers, later in the draft, take the talented kids. Bill Napoleon, Hall of Famer, always told me, Mel, take the talented guys later in the draft. The guys are, I'll call them underachievers, Dan, but they have a big-time skill set, and for one reason or another, they got dinged in the process a bit. Take those kind of guys in the 5th, 6th, 7th round or bring them in as undrafted free agents.
Also, when you want to change positions, Bill Belichick was big on this, taking college quarterbacks and putting them into other spots, like Julian Edelman, who became a great wide receiver. Sometimes you'll see a quarterback transition to tight end successfully. That's always a good thing to look at. And what you're hearing about this draft from people like Mel and others is the strength of it is like 50 to 100. There really aren't that many first-round worthy picks, which makes the Commanders' position interesting. They have only 5 picks. The first one will be number 29 in round 1 on Thursday night if they keep it. When you get to these quarterbacks, if one of them is still sitting around there, if Shador or Jackson Dart or somebody like that is sitting there late in the first round, Washington doesn't need a quarterback. Now, Scott McCloughan, the 2 years he was the GM of the team, said, I always take a quarterback in the draft, assuming you have a lot of picks, and he always did. Because why not? You never know. If your number lands, you got Tom Brady. The Patriots didn't need a quarterback when they took Brady in the 6th round. They had Drew Bledsoe, who'd been number one a few years ago and was the franchise quarterback for the team. But if you take one, it's relatively cheap to spin the wheel, and you never know what's going to happen. And so I think that Washington sitting there, even though they probably wouldn't be able to draft a quarterback, maybe they would towards the end. They have no 3rd-round pick and no 5th-round pick. So they're picking, at the moment, 29, 61, 128, 205, and 245. It's also interesting that, what are we, a little over 48 hours away from the draft, and there's been no major trades so far. I think there will be trades on Thursday, but kind of interesting that nothing has happened so far. Most interesting player in the draft, maybe the most interesting since Mel has started doing this over 40 years ago, Travis Hunter of Colorado.
Travis didn't play just wide receiver. He didn't play just corner. He was out there every play, every snap. That, to me, prevents him from being as good at one or the other that he could be. So even with that said, Dan, he's my number one wide receiver and he's my number one corner. And it's amazing if he would just focus on one position, how great he could be. So to me, Travis is as unique as any player in the history of the draft because he is going to play both ways right away. Deion said it perfectly. You're not going to have a drive at the end of the first half or a drive in the fourth quarter or two drives in the fourth quarter, settling that game, that outcome, and have Travis Hunter standing on the sidelines when our cornerbacks are getting beaten, the quarterback's driving his team right down the field against my defense. You can't have that. So Deion is perfectly correct. He's 1,000% correct on that. This kid's got to play both ways.
I don't think regularly, but this wouldn't be the first. Remember Troy Brown, who played with the Patriots. Now, he was not a top-level wide receiver. He was more like a 2 or a 3, more like a 3 with the Patriots. But when they needed help in the secondary, he played defensive back. These guys are football players. And, you know, at some point along the way, maybe not necessarily in college, but along the way, they played both ways. You know, no matter what high school team you're on, you got to have the best players on the field. So it wouldn't be that foreign for him. But his career is going to be interesting to watch. And the thing that he said last week about he would walk away from football if a team doesn't agree to play him both ways, that's not going to happen, but it's interesting posturing. And once he gets into training camp, is that going to be an issue with the team that takes him when they say, look, you're too valuable at the position we chose for you, whether it's wide receiver or whether it's cornerback? And is he going to push back on that? And is that going to be a problem? Probably not. You know, Deion knows the game. He'll coach him up the way he does that. People look at Deion and say, oh, you know, maybe he's a troublemaker. He's not a troublemaker. He's old school. You know, he's the one who tells you, you know, do what the coach tells you to do. But what he's doing and posturing now could be related to which team he wants to go to. It does appear like he's going to wind up with the Giants, as Cam Ward, apparently, according to Schefter, has already been told that he's going to be taken by Tennessee at 1. Then it's possible that Travis Hunter winds up 2 with the Giants. Last thing from Mel, this was a quarterback draft story, someone we're familiar with here, played at the University of Maryland.
Well, in 1984, Dan, my first year at ESPN, I had Boomer Esiason, the third highest rated player on my board. Right now, Shador's at 5, by the way, okay? So say Shador goes in the late first. He goes in the second. What an idiot Kiper is, right? He had Shador. Well, guess what? Boomer was 3. Bengals had 3 picks in the first round. Dan, I'm sitting there first year at ESPN. You know what's going through my head? I'm one and done. I'm sitting there with Chris Berman, Boomer, and Bob Lee. I'm thinking, I'm not going to be back for the 1985 draft. My third highest rated players there, and the Bengals passed them 3 times, Dan, and 2 of those 3 were busts. They took him in the second round. Now, according to that philosophy, if you didn't like him enough to take him with your first 3 picks in there, why are you taking him in the second round? He's going to be your quarterback. He's going to be the guy, whether he's a first, second rounder. He's your guy moving forward. You didn't even like him enough to take ahead of Ricky Hundley, Pete Koch, and Brian Blados. Okay, so again, I don't buy into any of that nonsense. Brett Favre was like a highly rated player, went in the second round, right? Look what happened with him. Aaron Rodgers was supposed to go number 1 3 weeks before the draft and slid to 24. The 6 of the 8 sliding picks in terms of my rankings over the last, since 1970, Dan. I went all the way back to 1970. 6 of the 8 hit. 6 of the 8 sliding quarterbacks hit. So maybe Shador will be one of the 6 that does really well.
And one of them would probably be Joe Montana. Now, remember, Joe Montana was a 3rd-round pick by Bill Walsh in the 49ers, which in retrospect seems insane. You don't get past 5 on the all-time quarterback list. You might not even get past 3 on the all-time quarterback list before you get to Joe Montana. Bill Walsh knew he was perfect for his West Coast offense. It was his first year as the coach of the 49ers, and that's the kind of guy he wanted to run his offense. And Walsh thought that he could get him in the 5th round. Now, this is Joe Montana from Notre Dame. This is a period of time when there aren't that many college games on television. And his last game was incredible. He had the hypothermia when he's playing in the Cotton Bowl against, I think it was Houston, and had to get chicken soup to get the body temperature up to get back on the field. Pulls off this enormous comeback, last-second touchdown pass. The legend of Joe Montana, which had already been established, took it to another level. This is Joe Montana from Football University of America, Notre Dame. And because of his size, he was thin and had sat the bench for quite a while at Notre Dame. He did not become a full-time starter until the middle of his junior year. He essentially only started for a year and a half at Notre Dame. It's crazy. And he thought he could get him in the 5th round, and the only reason that Walsh took him in the 3rd round is he was starting to hear some things that made him nervous. But he might have even taken him in the 5th round. So when you look at what happened with Boomer Esiason, no slight to Mel, it could have been that the Bengals thought, well, nobody really is interested in him. We think we can get him in the 2nd round. And true, what he says about the picks they used earlier to take guys who were not very good, well, they didn't take them thinking they weren't going to be very good. He thought that those were guys who were, object of other teams. They wanted them. And they were going to get him before the other teams did, and they were pretty safe thinking that they could take Boomer in the 2nd round. Worked out pretty well. Boomer took the Bengals to the Super Bowl. Not a Hall of Fame quarterback, but a damn good one, and a very good pick in the 2nd round for them. And also, it also tells you what things were like in 1984, that there wasn't this unbelievable rush to get a quarterback. It was more about running back in those days. And to think that the first quarterback taken in the 1984 draft was not taken in until the 2nd round. That would never happen today. Never. Because you got to keep trying. You got to keep swinging until you hit on one. And, you hope that you're like, on the Patrick Mahomes deal, that you get him in the middle of the 1st round, and he turns out to be one of the best of all time. All right, enough of that. Dennis Scott is going to join us next with the Capital Classic coming up on Saturday, a little preview of that, and also his multi-talents, which were on display this past weekend. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. All right, here we go. We got the Capital Classic coming up on Saturday, and it's the Care First Arena in Southeast. And I'm so glad it's continuing because it started in 1974 at the old Capitol Center. Bob Gagan got it started, and it had big juice at the beginning because Moses Malone played in that game, the most highly recruited player in the country. Lefty Driesell had landed him at the University of Maryland, and the Capitol Center went nuts when they said he came from the promised land. Moses Malone didn't have a big game that day, but went on to an incredible NBA career. And Dennis Scott is joining us now, and he is now the CEO of the Capital Classic. I am so glad, Dennis, that this is continuing because this is a part of my youth growing up. I'm sure it was as well as with you playing in it. How great is this to continue now in 52 years?
It's amazing that this game is still going, still relevant in the DMV area, as the kids call it today. I have to give my partners, Tom and Pete, a lot of credit for, keeping the dream alive and bringing me a part of the family this past couple years. As you know, my son, Trey Scott, played in it last year. He's at Georgia State right now. Mm-hmm. So it's just one of these games now where the local kids have to understand that guys like myself growing up, in Northern Virginia, I couldn't wait for the opportunity to be a part of the Capital Classic. So I'm super excited to be the CEO and super excited to spread the love throughout the DMV and make sure everyone comes to support. Okay. But before we get into all the details on that and your great career, I want to talk about your current career and what you pulled off over the weekend. You showed great versatility as a player. At 6'8", you could play all 5 positions. But having been in my business for a long time, never was good enough to even try out for my high school basketball team. But I know the broadcasting business, and I know when somebody's in your ear and says, we got a problem, we need you to take over, how terrifying that can be. So this was last weekend. It's Miami playing Cleveland, and there's a problem with the audio from Spiro Ditas, who is the play-by-play, and Candace Parker, who's doing the analysis. And this was Dennis Scott in a situation where the producer says in his ear, we got a technical problem. We need you to do play-by-play.
And right now, fans will have a little technical difficulty. Bear with us as Andrew Wiggins has the ball right now on the wing. Pass to Ware. Back to Wiggins for the 3. Money ball. All right, Donovan Mitchell comes down the right wing. Jared Allen set the screen. Swings it. Garland being patient. Attacks the floater. Misses. Miami Heat with the rebound.
Flawless. Take us behind the scenes. What happened there?
Well, I was getting ready to do my normal sideline report hit. Was talking about Kenny Atkinson and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Are they ready to graduate? Because most basketball fans are picking Boston. So as I'm doing my report, Bert Bondy, our producer, one of the best in the business, says, "Hey, 3D, we have a technical difficulty. You be yourself. Do what you do. I trust you." So I just kept doing what I do. And when you've been around the game as long as I have to give a lot of credit to George Michaels, may rest in peace, and James Brown, who works for the NFL. Those were my two mentors when I was a kid on why I wanted to do television, why I knew I didn't want to coach. So I have to give that backstory for our listeners here in DMV. That's why I love doing television. That's why I'm in my 18th year now at NBA TV and TNT. George Michaels and James Brown are my two mentors.
Well, those are two of the best, and James, in addition to that, is one of the best people in the world as well.
Yes.
But just so people have an understanding, when you're doing play-by-play, you have an enormous amount of resources in front of you. You've done your sheets, and you've got your stats and all that.
Yes.
and most importantly, right, Dennis, you got a roster. I mean, you know the players, but you're having to do this, and not even from a great broadcast position, right? You're standing at the end of the court.
I'm standing up.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm standing up kind of behind the basket to the side, and you can see the fans looking at me like, is he still doing his report? What is he doing?
Did you have any idea? I mean, it's conceivable it could have taken 15, 20 minutes to get the audio fixed, right?
Yes, by the grace of the game, it wasn't, that little, maybe a couple minutes. I was able to hold the fort down, if you will. But if I would have had to do it the whole quarter, I probably would have had to run over to the table and probably pass the mic to Spiro. All right, Spiro, I don't get paid to do this. You do.
Do you? Was this the first time you ever done something like this?
Well, it was the second time. If you remember, a few years ago on NBA TV and TNT, we had the players only program where all the players were the hosts, sideline, and play-by-play. So I had 4 or 5 games I had done that back then, but that's the first time ever to do it on the fly with technical difficulties.
Well done. And your bosses should give you an enormous raise over there at TNT.
I hope they're listening. I
hope so, too. We're talking to Dennis Scott, who is the CEO of the Capital Classic, which is going on this weekend. We had Walt Williams on last week. Walt played in the Capital Classic the year after you did, 1988. Maybe it's selective memory. His team got blown out, and he didn't shoot that well, and he has no memory of it. The game that you played in 87, what do you remember?
I remember, because a lot of people don't remember my high school days, I remember getting a nice dunk. And Tom and Pete sent me the video. It was a little grainy. I was like, I did have hops a little bit back in the day in high school. Everyone knows me for shooting. I did dunk a little bit. That's the only thing I really remember. I just remember, obviously, the excitement of being a part of it and all the family coming to the game and things of that nature. That's all I really remember off the top of my head.
A little bit of reasonable defense in this game. The U.S. All-Stars beat your Capital All-Stars 100-86, but they had Larry Johnson and Rick Fox. I believe you were the only guy who played on the Capital team that made the NBA, or at least had a long career like you did. So I'd say pretty good.
Wow.
Yeah, and you had 14.
I'll take that. Thank you.
14 points. That's not too shabby.
That's not too shabby for an All-Star game.
Not at all. No, because you're not getting the full run, right? You got probably would you get about 20 minutes or something like that? Less than that?
Something like that. You play about half a game, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So we are talking to Dennis Scott, now with TNT, but a great player at Flint Hill on those Stu Vetter teams, had an incredible career at Georgia Tech, number 4 pick of the draft by Orlando in 1990, had a long career with Orlando and Dallas and Phoenix, and wound up with the Vancouver Grizzlies. And I was wondering about this because you were there when Steve Francis from Maryland was drafted by the Grizzlies, and he made it really clear, even draft night, which was held here at the now Capital One Arena, he didn't want to go there. Did he at all talk to you after he was taken by the Grizzlies?
No, I never had a chance to talk to Steve before, obviously before the draft, or because by the time I got there, the trade had already happened. And for anyone that's ever been to Vancouver, it's one of the most beautiful cities you've ever would travel to in the world.
Yeah.
So that part, it got a short change for now. For all the economic people out there, the taxes are off the chain over in Canada. So that's why a lot of the guys didn't want to go play for the Canadian team because you had to pay those high taxes.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
From a living standpoint, a great place to live. obviously it's a hockey-driven, country. So that part was still taking, the fans to kind of buy into it, and obviously Toronto's held on.
Yeah, well, he clearly didn't want to go there. I don't know if it was all taxes.
No, sir.
No, but
no, it was just being that far away from home. Come on now. We're
Yeah.
talking about Steve Francis. He loves his DMV now.
Right, but there's another thing about that draft, too, if you remember, that Elton Brand went number 1 to Chicago, and I think Steve thought that he was going to go number 1, so he was, like, doubly disappointed, about the fact that he wasn't going to go to Chicago, and he wasn't the number 1 pick. But it all worked out for him. I think he got, at one time, as I remember, he was out of the league for a couple of years, and he was still one of the top 10 highest-paid players because of the contract that he'd signed. Yeah, so
correct.
Yeah, so the economics worked out for him. You're 6'8", right? 6'8"?
Yes.
I'm
a little about 6'7" now, shrunk in my old age.
Well, yes, so all of us have. But in your playing days, 6'8", and you played at a period of time where the three-point shot was prevalent, and you were one of the best three-point shooters. But in those days, it didn't seem like it does today, where you are encouraged to shoot threes as much as possible. And, you had 6'8" power forwards in those days who were, considered rebounders and big men under the basket and so forth. I mean, do you think you came along too soon? If you came along today, would you shoot even more threes than you did back in the day?
The other night, I went to visit my mom in the nursing home in Atlanta. I said, Mom, you should tell Dad to go to the grocery store, and I should be born now, because now guys are taking 15, 16, and 23s a night.
Right.
I remember when J.R. Smith was with the Cleveland Cavaliers and they were winning the championship playing with LeBron. J.R. Smith played a game where he took 21 shots, and all 21 were threes. And I was just sitting there, my hands were sweating, I'm salivating. I'm like, why can't I play today's game? They're taking 23s again. Oh, my God. And half of these guys can't shoot.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm friendly with Brian Maggett, who I'm sure you're familiar with, and he played college basketball at Maryland when they didn't have the three-point shot, and that was his forte, shooting. Now, he's about my age. He's in his mid-60s. He says he can still shoot. You just can't move as well as you do in your younger days. Can you still shoot the threes like you used to?
It's like riding a bike.
Yeah.
Anyone that's in their 70s, 80s, you still can ride the bike. You may not be able to ride the bike as fast. You may not be able to ride the bike up hills, but you still can ride. So every time I go to the gym, there's always somebody, hey, 3D, you can't shoot them. Why can I shoot you? I say, well, put the money on the floor and it's going in my pocket.
Do you go out and do you do that to kind of keep yourself in shape? Is that like a physical activity that you do a lot?
No, I like to take, kids into the gym, work on their shot. One of my brands I've had on Shooters Paradise, I've had on NBA TV and TNT the last 15 years. My childhood best friend, Brian DeMonic, and I have Shooters Paradise, Alabama. We change boys and girls. And it's all about kids who want to learn the game the right way, play it the right way. I'm all for it. And to your point you're making for all the listeners, the three-point shot's not for everybody. It's for the people who put in the work. They understand when to take it, when not to take it. And I think that's where sometimes some of these kids get a little confused because they're watching Steph Curry, they're watching James Harden, all the step-back moves. I get it, but it's not for everybody.
Yeah, and maybe you're not the perfect person to ask, or maybe you are. There are old-school people who say the game isn't as good now because everybody's shooting the three. How do you view it?
It's too many. No, I'm not an old-school hater. I'm an old-school realist.
Mm-hmm.
If you're having old-school Marc Gasol shooting threes, or the game I'm covering tonight, if Jaren Jackson Jr. is shooting more threes than twos, well, the other team's off the hook. They're not in foul trouble. There's more offensive rebound opportunity because most bigs don't shoot the three at a high clip.
Right.
So I understand that the three is important. I'll say it again. It's just not for everybody. That's my only complaint.
Yeah, and it's also, changed the way we look at players who are drafted, players in the league.
Yes.
You played with Shaq, a young Shaq. How would Shaq fit in today's game?
He wouldn't fit at all, and he'd be back on the block. And if you listen to some of the interviews that's floating around on social media, Shaq would pop out, and I wouldn't give him the ball. I'd say, get your big ass back in the post. You're not Patrick Ewing. You're not David Robinson. You're not Rick Smith. You don't have a soft touch from the free throw line. You are a natural-born punisher. get back in the paint and punish people, and the rest is history. So I think that's the point for all the young big men out there in the world. If you do have a soft touch, then work on it and then work your way out. But if that's not how your bread is buttered, get your butt in the post and dominate.
And would he be dominant in today's game like he was, in the 90s?
Yes.
He would.
Yes. Because he is who he is. All of a sudden, he's not going to be dominant. Shaq, you put it like this for you listeners. You can drop Shaq. You can drop Wilt Chamberlain. There's certain big guys you can drop them in any era because they're dominant.
Yeah. And you, I would think, would benefit even more because the defense would collapse on Shaq. You'd be open for more threes, wouldn't you?
So drop Penny Hardaway, a healthy Penny Hardaway and a healthy Shaq in any era, and put me on the wing. Pick your poison. Pick your poison. Pick your poison. Or today's era, give me Kenny Anderson and Brian Oliver in this era and get us out in transition. Pick your poison.
Yeah. Did you ever have headbutting with coaches who didn't want you to shoot as many threes? Was that prevalent in your day?
No, I think my famous story was the first time my freshman year at Georgia Tech. We're running a transition drill, and everyone else is slashing to the basket and showing how high they can jump and dunk. So I just stopped. It was a 4-on-1 fast break. I stopped at the three-point line and shot it. And Bobby Kremer goes, no, good shot. And I said, yeah. I said, Coach, I don't jump like Tom Hammond and Dwayne Farrell, and they don't shoot like me, so I'm going to do this and let them do what they do. Yeah. That's a true story.
What do you think of guys coming in now? Like the Wizards took Alex Sarr in the draft last year. He's 7 feet tall, and they said the thing he needs to work on most is the three-point shot, which would have been unthinkable 20 years ago. What do you think about bringing in players like that?
Sarr doesn't need to work on his jump shot. Sarr needs to go down to Berry Farms and get roughed up a little bit.
Yeah.
That's what Sarr needs. I'm just being very honest. A lot of those, even Zach Ricochet for the Hawks, a lot of these European kids have talent. They just need to get roughed up and play harder. It's like people ask me all the time, what is the biggest difference? Sometimes you can tell when a European kid is hungry or not. Like when Giannis first came to the league, Giannis was starving. Mm-hmm. You see how hard he played. You see how hard he worked on his body and how he just turned into a superhero. That's what Sarr needs to do. Work on your body. Get stronger. Get nasty. Because the skill set's there. I need to see some more nasty that you want this and you want to be a great player. It's kind of like what Luka's going through right now. Luka, offensively, you could put him anywhere, any category. But defensively, until he has some more grit like he does on the offensive end, that's why some of the darts are being thrown at Luka right now. So it's that grit and grind that you really love the game of basketball.
Talking to Dennis Scott now with TNT. He is the CEO of the Capital Classic, which is going on at Care First Arena on Saturday in Southeast. And let's jump to that game and your involvement with it. Where do you see it going? I mean, will it ever, you think, get back to the point where it can be at a big arena, an NBA arena, or has it kind of found its place where it is now?
I think it's going to take some more time, and obviously there's other games out there, rightfully so. So it's up to me and other guys who are from the DMV area just to remind people on why the game is so important for the community, why it's so important for former guys. Just to remind people that basketball has been an outlet for so many of us in the DMV area to go out and to better our lives and better our families. And I truly believe the Capital Classic is a staple of that.
Yeah, well, the great thing, if you've never been to one, you get to see these guys before you start seeing them on a regular basis on TV. When Michael Jordan played in the Capital Classic in, 1981, right? I mean, how many people in the country knew who Michael Jordan was? And Magic and all those guys, right?
No, that's what made, I think they were saying in Detroit versus everyone. Well, you got to give Bob Gagan and his crew credit. We were first. It was the DMV versus everyone.
Yeah.
So when you really process that back in 1974, like the visionary that Bob had is off the charts. So I never take that lightly. So now it's up for the new generation to remind people that there's still a lot of talent in the DMV area, and people always want to come to Washington, D.C. because that's where the president is. That's where the monuments are. That's where all the historical places are. So you still want to come to D.C. and visit some of those places.
And there's a limit, as I understand, on the number of All-Star games, or is that no longer in effect? for a player.
They've finally taken that cap off where you can play as many games you want. When I came through, I only could play in 2 games. Obviously, I picked the Capital Classic first, and, of course, back then the McDonald's All-American game was still involved, and I played in those 2 games. But now kids can play as many games as you want. Now, with that being said, Mom and Dad, be smart. I understand you want to be in the Jordan Classic. I understand you want to be in the McDonald's game, but you're from the DMV. Make sure you give your homeland some love first before you go branch out and play.
Amen. Who are some of the guys that people would want to see on Saturday?
Well, first of all, I got to give my distant cousin, Jordan Scott. I'm good friends with Christy Winters, and, watching her play. So I'm happy to see her son get off to a good start. South Lakes going to Michigan State, and just a smooth player, 6'7", 6'8", can shoot the ball. Excited about him. And then Keywan Garris, his dad had a small stint in the NBA with the Sacramento Kings. He played with my son Trey 2 years ago in Atlanta at Mount Vernon School. So those 2 guys, and the big fella from home too. I want to give Eric. I think he says Reeby is his last name. Reeby.
Mm-hmm.
I like this young kid. I like the trajectory. Like we're talking about big guys. He has touched the shoot the 3, but I noticed that someone's in his ear. He's in the paint, jump hook, left hand, right hand. So I like the big fella going to UConn.
All right. Dennis Scott, one of the great players to come out of this area, played on those great teams that Stu Vetter coached at Flint Hill in the mid-'80s, Georgia Tech, NBA, and now doing great work for TNT. Good to talk to you. Best of luck going forward, and looking for a big crowd this weekend. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. Also, I want to give the local girls from the DMV, they're going to be playing the prelim game at noon, so I got to give the ladies some love, too, because they're balling out as well.
Very good. Dennis, thanks so much. Good to talk to you.
Thanks for having me, guys.
That's Dennis Scott. And, again, you talk about someone born too soon. 6'8" guy, shoot the 3 like he did coming into the NBA today. Keep shooting, young man. Keep throwing it up there. It's just, the luck of the lottery when you happen to be born. All right, coming up next, we will get to what Nico Harrison said in his news conference yesterday and what the TNT crew said about what he said. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.